This is Deborah Atkinson, and you're listening to the Voice for Fitness Professionals podcast, where I talk about all things programming, marketing, and selling, memberships, and personal training that's easy, enjoyable, and even fun. And with me today, you're going to love this. If you're ready to dive deeper, be more authoritative, more credible in your business. Reed Davis is a certified nutritional therapist, received honors for his postgraduate work at the University of San Diego School of Law, and is the founder of the Functional Diagnostic Nutrition, or FDN, certification course. Reed is known as one of the most successful and experienced clinicians in the world today, having provided functional assessments to over 10,000 clients for hormone levels, bone density testing, adrenal function, digestive problems, immune system, and detoxification issues, as well as testing for pathogens, food sensitivities, and many other related health problems. Rita served as health director and case manager at the Better Health and Wellness Center in Poway, California for over 15 years, and now teaches a course in functional medicine with over 2,500 trainees or graduates in 50 countries. He's also a clinical advisor at BioHealth Laboratory, where he helps doctors interpret lab test results and develops natural protocols to restore function instead of just treating the symptoms. Amen. Reed lives in Southern California, teaching the FDN certification course and helping his graduates to build robust private pay practices. So can you hardly wait to dive in, Reed? So thanks so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Deborah, for having me. It's a real pleasure. I'm willing to share anything I have with anybody, anytime. So you have at it. I'm just tickled to be talking with you.
Well, so you have such a unique background. So, let's dive into this. This is not your typical, I'm a personal trainer, so I evolved. Now, maybe you did some personal training, so tell me about that. But you had me at University of San Diego School of Law. So first of all, we all love that. But how do you, roll into interpreting and helping personal trainers develop their business? This is a pretty unique path.
Thank you. I'll try to make it short. I was in environmental law, and I was a paralegal. I was a pretty good one, I'd say. So I didn't go to the bar or anything like that, but I practiced in the environmental field, saving birds, bees, trees, water, air, things that are really, really important. But back in the late 90s, I decided to turn my attention to people instead of just, again, the air and water and birds and bees and things. It's all really important work. But from studying the environment, I realized how it affected people. And, that's just where some passion started to develop. I basically started talking with my son's chiropractor. My son back in the late 90s was an outstanding high school athlete. Doesn't that sound like a dad? So my son was this amazing athlete, and I was taking him to a chiropractor, and I started talking to her about wellness programs and, how can I get into helping people instead of just what I was doing. And she offered me a job to run her clinic and to go to school with her. She was getting a diplomat in nutrition and said I could go along with her, which I did. And then I started working in the office, managing it. And every single person walking in the door had to see me. As a case manager. And, I did that for the next 10 years straight and learned a lot of things along the way. Remember, I was a nutritionist there, so I also became a personal trainer and realized after not that long that diet and exercise, as important as they are, you can't be healthy without them, but that people were walking in the door with deeper issues and problems with that. So to answer your question, the transition from that, nutritionist, personal trainer type, working in a clinic that was very busy, on all the people, and kind of triaging everyone that came in the door, I realized their needs went much deeper than, we had chiropractic, acupuncture, massage. We had a DO there. We had a podiatrist for a while. We had a hypnotherapist for a while. So it was quite a wellness center, lots of modalities and things. And still something was missing. And so to answer your question about the lab testing, because that's today, this is 20 years later almost, I'm an expert in functional laboratory work as it applies to natural holistic protocols, basically behavior protocols. So the background was I went from environmental law and studying, the air and all these things, the environment, and then what it was doing to people, and then working with people individually. And I fell in love with that clinical side of it, with the face-to-face and working with people. I just, realized I was meant to do this. And yet, if I could just go on for another minute here, I realized in short order that the diet and exercise wasn't enough. Neither was it if they were seeing the chiropractor, acupuncture, or what. We had to dig deeper at the underlying causes, and that's why you and I got along so well when we first met, is because you feel the same way, So I started running lab work, and I ran thousands of labs on thousands of people, and after 10 years, learned a few things. I'll say, made a lot of my own observations, and came up with a system that just about anybody can duplicate, especially if they have similar to my background, nutritionist, personal trainer, health coach, that ilk, love my program. They love learning the labs and applying them to their clients and refining their protocols to include more than just stress and exercise.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's the future. We're really, you're in the past and you're amazing. 20 years ago, you were really ahead of the edge, the curve. You started it.
Nowadays, I think you're right. I was one of a few, and we pioneered some things, especially getting the lab testing in the hands of a personal trainer or nutritionist. And so I started that training program 10 years ago next summer. So we'll have our 10th anniversary next year. And we've trained, since you got my bio, closer to 3,000 people all over the world, how to run the labs and use natural protocols to fix what's really wrong instead of just what everyone else does, which is treat the symptoms or, that kind of thing. So, and now it's very popular, but back then it was pretty much a pioneering job.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that you've gotten in on the groundwork. And, the other thing that makes me feel really good about talking to you, I think, when I was writing You Still Got It, Girl, and this was 2 years ago now, 3 actually, while I was writing it, I was talking about, okay, how do you know what's going on? There are symptoms. We can guesstimate that based on this symptom, this is happening. And that's at least a step further forward. But then there's, all right, let's go, get lab testing and interpret it. And so I did, I tested myself on anything that I was going to write about. And, and there is that. But what I love about talking to you is that you've packaged it up. You put it together in a real user-friendly, and I'm talking from the trainer's standpoint. But I also love that you have a background in law, and I think that's a concern for, if you're an owner, that's a concern if you're a director or you are the personal trainer, and maybe you wear all of those hats. There's a concern about where's my scope of practice and what can I do? And I think that insurance claims and cases have trainers running scared a little bit about what they can do within their scope of practice.
Right. Well, I can address that because I dealt with it from day one. And, part of the scene for me was that I did work in a doctor's office, which actually put double pressure on me, if you will, because they're very fussy about only they can diagnose or treat anything. So I had people walking in the door. There's nothing to read. And they had long chronic issues that they've been dealing with for years. They might have seen 4 or 5 practitioners already or more, and no one had helped them yet. And so, I had to figure out what's wrong. Now, it might have been very naive at the time, but I decided I would be the last person they had to see. If there's any way, I was going to figure it out. And so I started running the labs, and I was working under a doctor. So at the time, it was pretty easy. Later on is when I had to develop a program so that anyone could run the labs. So at first I was running labs, but I still was not allowed to diagnose or treat anything specifically. It's more just what's broken or what's wrong, what could use improvement. And I came up with the term, I didn't invent it, but just started identifying healing opportunities. So that's not the same as diagnosing and treating specifically. It's not saying, here's your diagnosis. Oh, you've got fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue or whatever it is. They already had diagnoses. Most of them had 2 or 3. And so the last thing they need is some other whack job who's not even a doctor diagnosing them. They don't want a diagnosis. They want to know, do you know what's wrong with me? And then, can you fix me? And so I would say, look, if you'll let me do a little detective work, get me some saliva, some urine, some blood, and some stool. Let me look for healing opportunities, figure out what could stand improvement. And then, so there's no diagnosis in that. So it's totally legal. And again, I've been doing it for 20 years. And I've never been even approached as practicing out of scope or without a license or any of those things. And neither have any of my graduates, because they get it. You have to really understand. We're not just saying we don't diagnose. We really don't. We just identify a healing opportunity. And then you get people engaged in a process, because you also can't treat anything specifically. So you can't label anything as a medical diagnosis, and you can't then treat that one thing. You have to treat everything. We call it non-specifically. Now, the word non-specific treatment is well known in the health community as things you do that make you better, that improve function in the body, improve metabolic processes, or correct imbalances, or whatever it might be. So those things are not treatment of anything specifically. It's treating everything non-specifically. And that is not legal jargon or so. It's just the truth. We treat nothing specifically, but everything non-specifically. For instance, exercise. So our program, by the way, let me back up and say, we have diet, rest, exercise, stress reduction, and supplementation. And those 5 elements encompass everything we do for a person and get that person to do. And it really is a self-care program. So when you eat right, it doesn't treat any disease or condition specifically, but it treats every cell, every tissue, every organ, every system in your body. When you eat the right amount of protein, fat, and carbohydrates, and the right ones, and oh, by the way, avoid the foods that you're sensitive to, it does not treat any specific condition. It treats every cell, tissue, organ in your body, every condition, if you will. And so the same thing with sleep, rest. Can you say that's a treatment? Well, it actually does treat every cell, tissue, organ, and system in your body. The entire organism benefits, and it's a required thing to do to be healthy. So that's the nature of every part of our protocol. Treat nothing specifically, everything non-specifically, and you will never. You'll keep your nose clean, put it that way. You'll never. No one can even really raise an eyebrow at that. It's just so logical and true. So you're educating. So you have the 2 elements. One is the investigation, which is running the labs. You do not provide any medical diagnosis. You only look for healing opportunities. These are things that I can train people to how to interpret the labs. And then the protocols are non-specific treatment of every cell, tissue, and organ. And it's quite remarkable what happens.
Love it. Love it. Mm-hmm.
When a person follows the protocol. That's where the sort of, I don't like this word too much, but miracles occur. Really surprisingly good outcomes in case after case after case, thousands and tens of thousands of cases. And I'll just add one thing. Even if the client did have a diagnosed condition, we don't care what their diagnosis was, because they're usually just a label for a cluster of symptoms.
Brilliant. Really brilliant. So I'm going to touch on this again, and you may be thinking, Deborah, are you not listening to me? But I want to hit this again, and I'm going to, so maybe beat a dead horse. And I want to ask, so some of our listeners, many of them, really, because you and I are the two lucky ones.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if we're looking at what can we do based on where we live with nutrition, I'm in Colorado, you're in California.
Right.
So it's a free-for-all,
Yeah.
which is, good for those people. Boy, and this is going to sound self-righteous, and I don't mean it to, but, for people who are well-intended, well-educated, and really do know what they're talking about and know, how to help and not to go beyond a place where they can't help, or know when to call the game and say, I can't, I don't have every answer, but we can pretty much do anything. We have free reign. However, the other 48 states, if you're listening from the US right now, not all of you are, I realize that, they have stronger parameters around what they can do. And in most states, you cannot give too specific or very at all specific nutrition information unless you are a registered dietitian. And many of you are listeners who are in states where, you've got a form you've got to fill out for your insurance coverage, and, boxes that if they're not correctly checked, that, you have no insurance. You won't get covered if you're giving nutrition information and anyone other than an RD is giving it. So that, I think, is where, people get scared, even though we know RDAs are antiquated, and there is no one size fits all that works.
Mm-hmm.
Hormone stress, exposure to toxins, all of that change our nutritional needs. What's a trainer, or maybe more so a business owner, to do?
Yeah, well, there are certain realities around what you said, and you touched on it. One is the insurance aspect. So part of the reasoning behind the regulations in some states, and I'll say there's a lot more green states than just Colorado and California. We're still quote unquote green states, and there are there's a map actually of the red states, which is the most restrictive, and then there's orange, and then there's yellow. But you want to know what they really are referring to. It's not so much what you can say or not say about nutrition and the education you can provide. It's who gets to bill the insurance company, who's authorized to send that bill to the insurance company. Or, so in some places, like California, green state, a doctor can hire anybody almost to give nutritional coaching in his office, and he can bill it to their insurance company. Now, in some states, and this is where those different colors and the different regulations come in. No, he can't hire anybody. He has to hire a certain level of education, like a CCN, Certified Clinical Nutritionist. Oh, now he can bill for their time. And then in the red states, they have to be a registered dietitian, or he can't bill for their time. And as a matter of fact, they can bill for their own time. They're allowed to bill insurance companies for that. So that's what that's all about. And you want to know what, when you read my introduction, the last statement you made, the last sentence was, Reed lives in Southern California teaching the FDN course and helping his graduates to build robust private pay practices. So you know what we say? Poop on insurance. Like I don't want insurance dictating to my client or to me what I can, what they can do. And matter of fact, doctors hate it too. They're completely handcuffed by the insurance companies and the gatekeepers there as to what labs they can run, what the diagnosis codes that will be paid for that type of complaint. It's just so highly regulated. It's no fun anymore for doctors. And so we don't get it. We're not in that game. So I'll say that is the main overriding thing about regulation stuff. It's not so much about you're going to get in trouble for telling Mrs. Smith to eat more apples. She tells that to her kids. And I'll just throw this in there that nobody can tell me or you what you can put in your mouth. You can eat anything you want. And I can tell anyone, just as a basic freedom of speech, that what I think about that, why I do what I do, why I eat a certain amount of protein, fat, and carbohydrates. So no one can tell me what I can put in my mouth. And, the First Amendment protects my free speech in terms of sharing that. But you really don't have to worry about it because those regulations are designed to keep the insurance billing under check. The other thing I'll say, if you want to talk about this subject, is that you don't go, I'll say, peeing in their backyard. I hope I can say that because I just did.
I think it's too late.
There are forces that would create monopolies if they could, and these would include the big food companies. And not even going to name them. You know who they are. And so they use some of these regulations and some of these people who unfortunately become pawns in the game. I mean, again, you mentioned well-intended people who might go get a certain certification or register as a certain type of practitioner in a certain state. And so they become the pawns of those that would create monopolies. So guess what they get to do? Institutional food. So they want that's where the money is for them. It's not in helping Mrs. Smith lose a few pounds. It's in schools and government and hospitals and these huge institutions that buy a lot of food and are responsible for sort of distributing food. Now, in Florida, for instance, I named a state. Now, that's one where I have a particularly, they've been particularly egregious in the regulations they've been able to pass and get through. For instance, in school lunches, pizza is considered a vegetable. So along those lines, I could come up with other examples. But so what I say is we don't sort of go messing in their backyard. A personal trainer or nutritionist really isn't who's running their own business, even if it's growing, expanding. You're really not going to go after school lunches. And it doesn't mean you couldn't if you really had a passion to, because all you'd have to do is get the parents aside and talk to them. But you wouldn't go to the school and the district and say I'm an FDN practitioner, nutritionist, and I want to do school lunches. That's again sort of going in their backyard, and we just kind of leave that to them. And that's the crux of how I sort of look at that, and why I'm not worried, not one bit.
Awesome. What do you think, Reed? I mean, what's the future for personal trainers?
Well,
how's that going to evolve?
Yeah. It's very, very interesting because, as a nutritionist, personal trainer, I see the value in diet, eating right, and in exercise. You can't be healthy without those. And, some personal trainers work generally with general population. Others specialize in athletes. And so there's room for everybody. If you just want to do performance enhancement, that's great. I used to own a gym, so I've sort of seen different aspects of it, but I fell in love with, again, and became very passionate about what's really wrong with the person, what's really holding them back from being happy. And you can't be happy without your health. You have to be healthy. And so that takes more than diet and exercise. So I see personal trainers continuing with what they're doing and playing a part in people's health. But for instance, now I don't really practice much anymore. And if I decided to go back into the clinic, I wouldn't do personal training. I'd hire a few personal trainers and they could do that part of the protocol. But it is only part of the protocol. So it's up to the individual personal trainer and what they want to do. As an industry, I think that what they're going to end up being, because we really all are in a sense, health coaches. So the health coaching business is expanding. One doctor told me that the country right now needs 250,000 health coaches, people trained to do what I teach. Now, I'm not the only teacher anymore. I used to be, but I'm the one that's been around the longest and, have a very solid program that's tried and true. And I'm not I'm kind of a no frills. It's really practical training. And Deborah, you've heard me say this before. I've had master's program people and PhDs even say that after going through my program, it was the most practical thing they ever took. Way more practical than a lot of what they were forced to go through in their master's and PhD programs. There's none of the frills of academia. It's practical stuff. Here's the labs. Here's what you need to be looking for. Here's the healing opportunities that can be identified. And then here's how to fix them. Here's how to get people doing the right things, or at least here's the right things for them to do. And my coaching.
So let's talk.
Go ahead.
Let's talk a little bit about that, about your coaching and your support of that coaching piece. So I think the healing opportunities, that's one piece of it, but then getting people to do what they need to do in order to feel better. So how much of your certification course focuses on that?
Well, it's one, I won't say a third, but there are three main elements to our system. And so in the new iteration of my course, it will be broken up into those three areas. Right now, it's really cool. It's very organic, and you learn everything as you're going through it. But there are three parts. Well, number one, you investigate. You have to learn how to onboard people correctly, first of all, which I have my entire sort of sales program, if you will, onboarding system included. So all the business coaching and things I do. But you onboard people correctly. And then you have to know how to take a good history. And we use forms for that for the most part. And then you run the labs. That's what I do. What I teach is, let's investigate. Let's look at saliva, urine, blood, and stool and figure out what's really wrong, or at least what are the healing opportunities. And so that's step one, is investigate. Step two is create the Dress for Health Success program. And that's, again, diet, rest, exercise, stress reduction, supplements. One sec.
Love that. And so that acronym is so awesome.
Yeah, Dress for Health Success. Well, it's such a successful program that I had to trademark it. And so now my graduates all can use that. But those are the elements that actually repair, rebuild, restore, rebalance every cell, tissue, organ, and system in the body, whether it's the hormones or the immune system or digestion or their detoxification systems. So you have to know what to fix, and you have to know what's going to fix it. And then the third part is being prepared. Excuse me, I'm just having to clear my throat. Sorry about that.
No problem at all. If you're listening, Reed was under the weather a little bit yesterday, so he's back with us today, thankfully.
Thank you. And even to health coaches like me who've been around a long time, you can get whacked by some mean stuff that's out there. And so what I was saying was
step three.
Yeah. Part one's the investigation. Part two is designing the Dress program. Then someone has to run the program. Guess who gets to do that? Well, we all do it on ourselves. And people that we coach have to do it too. So we send them home with homework, and then we check in with them to make sure they're doing it. And so my coaching system is accountability sessions. What their complaints are, because you've onboarded them. They have correct expectations. They know it's not going to be 3 weeks and all of a sudden they're miraculously, recovered from a 20-year-old chronic stress-related problem. So they're going to have to go home and do some things. And you're going to meet up with individual limitations that just appear. And that's what I learned after 10 years in the clinic, is that everyone says, yeah, I understand. Yes, I can do it. Yeah, I'm going to eat right. I'm going to go to bed on time. I'm going to join the gym and hire a personal trainer. I'm going to reduce stress in all the ways that we talked about and the techniques we talked about. And by the way, that's where the labs really come in, because it's the hidden stressors that we identify. And then take their supplements. And I'm not in the supplement business, but I know a few things about it. And I teach a lot on that subject too, to be supportive and that kind of thing. So you can give them their program, then they have to go run it. And everyone says, yeah, okay, I'm going to go run this thing. Then they're going to meet up with, I just call it individual limitations. And everybody has them. And so, you know what? You've got to be able to identify those things and correct course. And sometimes it's being a disciplinarian. Sometimes it's being, another method of just getting them past that limitation. And, you can always disengage too. If they just can't get it done, I tell people, hey, look, you're not really running the program. What do you want me to do? Repeat everything I said last week or 2 weeks ago? I'm not going to do it. You do this program, so that you can give me honest feedback, so that we can see, what changes are taking place, what reactions have, and then I can help you to the next level and the next level. And so, again, we're pretty much, I use a disciplinarian or accountability coaching style. It's not as nurturing as what some other people are teaching, but it definitely gets the job done, and it keeps me stress-free. I don't need any more stress already. And so I've, got that part handled, and people understand that it's their cross to bear. One last thing on that will be, and this should be emancipating. This whole system is emancipating. It's like being free. Wow. I don't have to fix every single person and every single complaint they have and all these things that they come up with all the time. I just need to keep them on the program. And that's really your job, is to keep them on the program. It takes time to repair, rebuild, restore, rebalance. So your job is to keep them on the program, and you're not even, guaranteeing anything. There's no guarantees in this, but there are very reasonable expectations. So I onboard people with reasonable expectations, and sometimes there's a lot of challenges, but again, I tend to under promise and over deliver. When you check in with them certain points and you ask them, how's this and how's that, and they go, oh, I haven't, that's gone. Yeah, I don't even remember having that. Okay, well, give me a high five or something, a little credit, whatever. Actually, you don't, all you really need is them to refer you to their friends and family and coworkers and stuff. Just, okay, great. Then I want a referral, and that's how we build our practice without having to market so much. Marketing is what takes the fun out of it. It's really a referral-based practice.
Yeah, but I love so much that you've just said. I mean, biggest quotes, I think, of the day for me are treat nothing specifically, everything non-specifically, and yet, what a difference you make in healing everything. Yeah. I think, I don't know, maybe my favorite quote of the day is poop on insurance. Yeah. And I think for so many personal trainers listening, that is funny and humorous, but for years, personal trainers have thought it would be so great when we could run this through insurance. And what trainers maybe listening are not quite aware of is that even doctors are walking away from that because, they don't want the thumb of insurance on what they can do and how they can help. So what you've been wishing for all along may actually be the last thing you actually want to happen. Mm-hmm. And, I think you pointing that out was so extremely valuable, But the other thing that you've mentioned, and in doing that, I mean, you really, I think, you gave me your brand here. But when you said, there's no guarantee, but there's reasonable expectations. And what I hear you say is, I am, pretty straightforward and pretty, right in their face. And here's the way it is. And if you want to get better, you're going to do this. And if you don't, I'm not going to tell you the same thing over and over every week. Right. I mean, that is definitely, you. And like you said, someone listening may have more of a nurturing nature to them and go about it differently. But if you're listening, I hope that you distinguish that, that's Reed's brand, that's what he's selling, and so smart in order to set his boundaries. So this is who I am. This is who I want to work with. And so somebody who really needs that coddling and encouragement and the same message 15 times, that's probably not his ideal client. We're not a good match, basically. And so you simply, need to define, who are you? I mean, what is your style? Who do you want to attract? Who do you want to work with? And know that. And, even those of you who are more nurturing, by nature, I would highly encourage you to look back at your year. This is perfect timing, and say, where do I get my most energy? When I'm working with X clients, who was it that gave me the most back? And who was it that drained me the most? I think sometimes mistakenly we think nurturing is the way to go. And yet, if those are the people sucking life from you, from what you really want to do, you may want to relook at, who do you want to attract? And it's not that everybody doesn't need help, but you don't have to be the one to help everybody.
Yeah, that's true. And you can't help everybody, but everybody almost needs help. So you'll never run out of customers or potential customers. Never. I mean, there's enough to go around. Trust me. You don't have, like people have said, yeah, I want to take your course, and I think I'm the only one in my town. And I go, well, that's not good. We need 10 in your town. That way everyone's going to one of us, and everybody is talking about it and saying, yeah. And I mean, it's you have to have an abundance mentality. We've talked about that too, Deborah. But what I'll say is that you can pick and choose your ideal client. Like mine was always women in their 40s and maybe even in their 50s, because they were independent. They had, they're working. They had their own checkbooks, and they knew what they wanted, and they paid attention to their bodies. They, if something was, if you get an owie, they want to know why does this hurt, or why is this not looking the way it should, or, things like that. And so, but guys, not so much, more, unless they were, again, into the working out and the physique and things like that, like they'll ignore an owie. That's what men do, right? But they care more about their cars running good than their bodies. But, women pay more attention. So, but you can work with any demographic you want. And here's the thing, and I don't know how much time we have left, so this will only take a second. People have a certain number of steps to go before they reach their goals. So if someone wants to just lose a few pounds and have more energy, they may only have a few steps to go. Again, you just sort of get their diet and rest and extra, just get them living, better and stuff. And they're right up the steps, to their goal. They've lost a few pounds, they have more energy. They thank you and they refer people to you. Other people have a lot of steps to go. They've been diagnosed with 4 different conditions by 4 different doctors, and 20-year history or longer of this thing, that thing, and the other. And so they have a lot more steps to take. And that's where you better have a system if you're going to take on those kind of people. So I'm not afraid of any type of client at all. But I pick and choose based on, do I get along with them? Do I want to work with this person? And certainly you have your choices. So, if they don't sort of impress me as a genuine person who's going to be highly committed, I'll pass. But, if they have a problem and they've are really willing to do what we ask them to do, then I'll bend over backwards and try to help anybody, anyone like that. So, but that number of steps they have to go is something you learn to predict. And you may not want to take people who are at the bottom step and they got 1,000 steps to go. But you can sort of, play that any way you want.
Yeah, love that. Great analogy. And I think we could go on for a long time because you've got so much to offer, and you're offering something in a way that takes personal training to a whole different level and a different level of credibility and authority. And I love so much that you added the comment, that, we don't want you to be the only one in your community, which so often we as trainers think, well, I want to do this because nobody else is doing it or because nobody's done that yet. Really, that's not always a good sign. You want more people wanting it. You want to create demand for it. And so in that vein, I'm going to make sure, Reed, that if it's okay with you, we're going to put the link to learn more about your course, your certification in the show notes. Mm-hmm. And, here's what I love. Biggest question of the day, potentially. Is there a question that you wish I would have asked you for those trainers listening?
Oh, funny. Yeah, I'm just, we covered the history and I think people can kind of glean from what we talked about, whether it's something they want to learn more about. And, I'm not sure, the future is to expand, and to get everybody hiring a health coach. Like everybody needs a health coach. I'll say even me, but we all need, help each other. And
I know somebody.
So that's the future. And so there's, it's time to dive in. If you like helping people and you want to do it for a living, I can show you how to make a very good living helping people and really helping them. And it might be just to sort of expand your horizons. If you're a nutritionist, personal trainer, health coach, I've got some special things for you. Very specialized training. And it's the only place you can get it. Like I only teach one course. So no other course is going to teach you what I will.
Yeah, way ahead, cutting edge. And just my little testimonial to anybody listening, I've been involved in the fitness industry for 34 years. I mean, in the academic side of things and in the private sector side of things, working with some of the biggest certification and membership agencies for fitness business people, fitness professionals, and I've never come across anything like it. And, the fact that you've been out there for 20 years and I've missed it somehow, but I think we're all more in tune with hormones, with gut health, and, feeling a little bit like I wish there was more I could do. Well, if you're thinking that, here you go. Here's more that you can do. So Reed, thanks so much for being here.
And thanks for having me, Deborah. It's a real pleasure. Anytime.
And if you are listening and you have a question for me or for Reed and we missed that, then leave it below the show link at fitnessmarketingmastery.com. Go to the show notes for this episode to get the links that we've mentioned and numerous ways that you can connect and follow Reed and Functional Diagnostic Nutrition in social media platforms to watch what they're doing and see who they are and see if it's a good fit. So if you are listening to this show before December 9th, 2017, there's still time to jump into the Social 365 webinar this coming Saturday. And that link is below the show where you'll see the invoice, find exactly how little it is to join us, and you can private message me for more details. For you to attract more, keep more, and help more people and have the freedom that you want.